Previously, I've spoke about what I consider to be the most underrated and underappreciated Batman series ever made. I went into depth about how the first season to me was maybe the best season of that show. And now that season 1 is done, I think it's about time to take a look back at season 2. Or, as it's now been retconned on Max, the second half of its first season. These 13 episodes offered up a lot of new things using a bunch of old faces. There aren't nearly as many new additions, but there are in fact new things being done with established characters. This was really the season of team-ups. Admittedly so.
Well, partnerships do appear to be all the rage these days.
This season it would seem like opposites attract, as the first episode sees birds and cats living in harmony.
Mass hysteria!
A Batman Returns reunion of sorts, pairing this universe's Penguin with this universe's Catwoman. It also seems to take a few cues from the movie in question, with Oswald being smitten with Selina and falling for her feline charm. Also much like in that movie, Batman takes a backseat to the baddies for a time being. It almost seems like the episode is going full remake, up until Penguin manages to manipulate his manipulator and trap the cat in the bat, leading to the two having to work together. Then again, I suppose a lack of loyalty isn't too dissimilar from the dynamic from the sequel, as there was definitely love there, but it was one-sided, and once rejected, there was no love lost. The ending of the episode even has what sounds to be a nod to the Elfman score, so I have to think on some level this was somewhat intentional. Similarly, the third episode sees a team that's both hot and cold on each other, in more ways than one. Mr. Freeze works alongside Firefly, which makes sense as the two have been depicted as being common crooks, with not so common abilities. And though they're both thieves, they're not exactly thick as thieves, constantly clashing throughout the episode. While their similarities as rogues brought them together, their partnership winds up being short-lived due to their many differences, having both conflicting powers and personalities. Now, I mentioned Penguin previously, and I'm gonna mention him a lot more throughout, as he seems to be the star of the show this season, returning on multiple occasions with a brand new accomplice each appearance. Though most of these team-ups end in a very similar fashion. A bridge burn that will inevitably be repaired, only to one day be burned down once again. Like, at this point in the series, we're only a few episodes in, and the Joker and the Penguin can't stand each other, though they will continue standing beside each other on multiple occasions after this. Oswald is definitely this season's main antagonist, and the emphasis on that sentence is in antagonist, because he spends all of his screen time antagonizing just about everybody. Heroes, villains, victims, doesn't matter, they're all the same to him. At one point, he attempts to control birds using some sort of sonic device, but it doesn't wind up working as intended. Instead, it gives him the ability to forcefully command Man-Bat, tormenting both the man and the bat by abusing his power and driving the Doctor mad. Their partnership is actually an imprisonment. It's a really unique premise for a plot, as it's far from your standard bad guy team-up, though I do think toward the end it gets wrapped up a little bit too quickly without a proper payoff. Penguin gets punched. That's the punchline. Eventually Batman rewires the device, and for a brief time being, he controls his Bat brethren. It's pretty interesting, but I think it might have worked better as a two-parter. And it's also weird for me seeing Penguin use a device trying to control birds, when he's been shown to be able to do that already in the series before this. I don't know, did he have a specific bird in mind that he couldn't quite communicate with? I'm not sure. Both he and the Joker make the most appearances this season, being the season highlight both in terms of quality and quantity. They're constantly competing not just with the Caped Crusader, but with themselves. They're always trying to outdo each other in doing in the bat, and sometimes that causes them to step on each other's toes, which is a lot easier done than said considering that Jokers are always out. But it's not just the villains that are working together this season. The season also sees Batman finally working alongside with the GCPD, in a very unofficial role from the shadows, which is fine for a guy who's referred to as the Dark Knight. This is a nice new development that sees this Batman really begin to be part of a team, something he would get very used to very quickly after this. I don't want to skip too far ahead here, but this man doesn't get a moment to himself past this season. It's just sidekick after sidekick, team after team. But again, we'll get there, eventually. While Batman and Yin make for good partners in crime fighting, not a lot is done with this pair. As a matter of fact, Yin kind of disappears for a while in episodes, which is extremely upsetting because she'll disappear entirely after these episodes. She seems so secondary in the second season, when she was first and foremost front and center in the first. Nevertheless, their short time together is time well spent. This story also sees her at odds with the rest of the department, because it's not like the Force have exactly taken on a pro-Batman stance. He still has to hide from those he helps. As a matter of fact, he does a lot of hiding this season. Certain episodes don't even necessarily follow him as the lead character, but instead rather have him appear as a plot point. Not every story is from his perspective. And you know what? I kinda dig that. It really adds to his aura. The Caped Crusader still feels like a man of mystery, and more importantly, a man with mystique. On these occasions, we're almost seeing him the same way those who encounter him do. This season also puts a lot of emphasis on the budding relationship between Batman and Catwoman, with the two going from friend to foe at almost any given minute. They team up, they square off, they make up, they break up, they get on good terms, things go bad, rinse, recycle, repeat. Now that may sound like a complaint, but in actuality, that just makes it a really accurate adaptation. I like the dynamic this duo has. It's very on brand for Bat x Cat, and she pretty much acts as the only romance of note in Bruce's life. I'm not just saying in this season, I'm saying in general, like on this show, she is pretty much the only romance Bruce ever has. Aside from Vicky Vale, who dated him for all of one in-between season movie. Though once again, we'll get there. This season sees that character develop a little bit more. She's more inclined to do the right thing, even if she rolls her eyes while doing it. On occasion, actually willingly handing over stolen goods to the hero. While Catwoman is clearly smitten with Batman, Selina does not similarly take a liking to Bruce Wayne, possibly preferring the person over the persona. Even though the person technically is the persona. Like I said, the team-ups really take center stage this season. But that's not to say that there aren't any new antagonists, as this season is the season that sees the start of the Riddler, who is looking considerably different here from what you might have imagined. As a matter of fact, I would actually call this Riddler a reimagining. No longer wearing his question mark signature suit. In its place, we have what I can only describe as we have Marilyn Manson at home. This is less Edward Nygma and more Edward Nightmare fuel, which is probably why this part is played by Nightmare on Elm Street actor Robert Englund. Yeah, that's right. Freddy Krueger himself is playing the Riddler.
Are you asleep?
And after all these years, I still don't know what to make of this performance. Because it's not bad, it's very good. But I just don't know if it's ideal for this particular character. Like, it feels wrong and almost insulting to say that this is incorrect, but it is inaccurate. It's just hard for me to reconcile this version of the villain with the part that's supposed to be played. And because of that, I think I've always appreciated this as its own unique take, but it's not exactly how I see the character or how I'd want to see the character. This time around, the Riddler isn't a solo act, as he controls a group of sidekicks known as the Riddlemen, who aid him in his various attacks against Gotham City. And that also is a somewhat reoccurring trope of the show, and more importantly this season. Riddler has the Riddlemen, we've discussed before that Penguin has the Kabuki twins, and even Joker is joined by Punch and Judy. This season also introduces Killer Croc, who is actually a pretty underrated take on the baddie, if I say so myself. I think he's always been depicted as being big and bad, but he's never been a big bad. But I think he's a lot closer to that here. He's a bigger deal than he's ever been, and he's a lot smarter than a lot of his previous on-screen incarnations. I'm not saying he's winning the Nobel Peace Prize anytime soon, but he's not exactly throwing rocks and hoping for the best. This Croc is threatening, and a lot more menacing than the previous animated adaptations of this antagonist. Yeah, say that 3 times fast. I couldn't even say it 1 time slow. He's not the most memorable character from the cartoon, but then again, Croc is not the best part of any story he's ever been a part of. Nonetheless, I think this is definitely one of the better Crocs on the big or small screen, played to perfection by Ron Perlman himself, who also played the Batman the Animated Series Clayface, amongst many, many other characters in comic book media.
Boy, you are beginning to stick in my craw.
Side note, I also really like that the show didn't give Croc a specific origin. Instead, it teased a variety of origins from the actual comics and asked the viewer to make up their own choice about his backstory as if he were the Joker.
Croc's story. Some think he's a genetic experiment, a crossbreed soldier. Others think he messed with the wrong kind of voodoo in the bayou. I'm thinking circus freak.
I really like that. Also making his debut this season is Hugo Strange. And this may just be my absolute least favorite design of this character. It is just so strange, and not in the way that his name would dictate. The one legitimately cool thing about this variant of the villain is that this part was played by Frank Gorshin, who is the original RIddler from the '66 Batman show. And while I enjoy his performance, I don't really like what's done with the character. I don't hate it, but it just overall never made an impression on me. Granted, there's a lot less for him to do here than he'd do in future seasons, but nevertheless, he never made an impact on the show. At least not to me.
Professor Hugo Strange. I'm a senior resident at Arkham Asylum for the criminally insane.
I really want to credit the dearly departed actor because he manages to make Hugo Strange come off as a legitimate psychiatrist and not some over-the-top campy bad guy in a Batman series. Which is kind of crazy when you consider that he's most famous for playing the most over-the-top campy bad guy in the most over-the-top campy Batman series. Seriously, this shows some serious range. Gorshin, I wish you were around to accept your roses, but unfortunately I will have to verbally just put them on your grave. He's completely unidentifiable in the role. It almost makes you wonder why they cast him in the part. But the fact that he played it so well is enough of an answer. Then you got characters like Spellbinder, who, oddly enough, had just made a much more memorable appearance on Batman Beyond. There's not a lot to this character overall in the comics, but I really appreciated what that other animated series did a little bit more than this. And because they're so close in time, I think that comparison is an inevitability, especially because he's not necessarily a villain that you would see in a lot of Batman media. Spellbinder implants hypnotic suggestions into the minds of butlers of billionaires, having them mindlessly steal from their employers. This is this villain's only major appearance, and honestly, it might have been one too many. I won't say that the episode is horrible, but for me it's the low point of the season. Spellbinder just isn't all that memorable. Allegedly, when originally conceiving this idea, the part was made for Mad Hatter, which would still make a lot of sense because it's dealing with hypnosis, which is something he's known to do. And I think that might have saved this episode a little bit. It would have made it a little bit more memorable with a character who is at least acknowledged in most adaptations. I'm not saying the Mad Hatter is the most famous Batman villain, but I think a lot more people in the public know about him than about Spellbinder. I'm not saying it would have made this episode good, but it probably would have made this episode a little bit more tolerable. Overall, this just felt very weak. It was a weak episode with a weak villain, a weak premise, and pretty weak visuals. I really don't mean to be so negative, but I just didn't get anything positive out of this. Though maybe the most significant in terms of new characters is the inclusion of Ragdoll. Originally, he was a lesser-known Flash villain of the original Flash, Jay Garrick. Yeah, definitely not at the top of Flash's rogues gallery, and not anywhere on the list of Batmans. I've seen a couple people online who haven't really watched the show refer to this character as Scarecrow in passing, and visually I could see why. I mean, you got a stitched-together supervillain facing the world's greatest detective. What does that sound like? But aside from a similar aesthetic, these two characters are nothing alike. Ragdoll is a double-jointed thief and an absolute oddity if there ever was one. He tries to team up with Catwoman, but finds out pretty quickly that there really is no honor amongst thieves. The two go toe-to-toe, but Batman winds up coming out on top. This character is really unique, and it's not one that you get to see often even on the series, as his one appearance that he gets this season is one of only a handful of appearances he gets on the show. Probably less, actually. I actually really happen to love this character. I like the gimmick, I like the look, I love the voice.
Did someone say cute and cuddly?
Which isn't surprising, as the character's actually played by future Joker actor Jeff Bennett. Not to be confused for this series' Clayface, Ethan Bennett. And speaking of which, the season's biggest moment wasn't the introduction of new foes or the inception of new alliances with old ones. Instead, it was the return of one. The man known as Clayface returns to take his revenge on his creator. But the clown who made him the man he is today seems entirely unfazed, claiming to not even recognize the melting man he made, as it has to later be revealed to him that the detective is also the Clay criminal. After a quick trial, Bennett is released back into the public. Somehow. But it very quickly goes awry when he attempts to capture his tormentor. Not in the name of revenge, but in the name of justice. Not trying to punish the Joker for what he did to him, but instead trying to protect others from meeting the same fate at his hands. Later on, this season introduces the dead man, the myth, the monster. Solomon Grundy, in a Halloween episode that came out in August. It was an interesting take on the man born on a Monday, with a much thinner and more slender look. The man who died on a Tuesday returns to wreak havoc on the descendants of Gotham's founding fathers, robbing them blind and destroying whatever property he didn't take. The episode shows the character's well-known origins, with many telling the tale, only for that tale to be revealed as just that, a tall tale, as this Grundy is just merely another Clayface impersonation. Except that this very episode would go on to imply that a Solomon Grundy does in fact exist, but he would never be seen on the show again. I don't hate this, it's a fun Halloween episode, but it's also kind of an episode that makes Clayface fall in line with the rest of Batman's villains. Rather than actually add to his ongoing arc, this just felt like an unneeded detour that didn't do much for the man behind the mud. But it's not just villains that are making an appearance, as the season finale introduces Commissioner James Gordon, though for whatever reason it seems that this comes at the expense of Detective Yin, as his entrance doubles as her exit. Yin's brief team-up with the titular hero ends when her secret is discovered by her colleagues. They take her badge and attempt to take her in, but ultimately she's saved by Batman. While the character is reinstated at the end, for one reason or another she never makes another appearance on the show, and this feels like a real missed opportunity. If you weren't going to bring the character back, why not keep her off the force? If you're bringing her back to the force, why not bring her back to the rest of the series? Unfortunately, much like her former partner, she was a character who was unique and had a relationship with Batman that mostly was left unexplored, which is highly disappointing. I enjoy what we got of her, but I don't get why we didn't get more of it. Jim Gordon is an important inclusion. I just don't know if his introduction needed to come at the expense of Ellen. But that's just me. Jim Gordon is shown to be the righteous figure that he's always been, and the part is played pretty well. Unfortunately, since he's such a late addition, we don't ever get a real feel for his character past the basics. This season ends with Jim Gordon and Batman's first meeting on a rooftop underneath a bat signal, with Gordon asking Batman to help make Gotham a safer place for his daughter and others like her, to which our hero agrees.
The hearts and minds of all of Gotham are behind you.
Other new developments this season include the Joker having an identity crisis, and for a brief time becoming Batman in what is a fan-favorite episode. It is maybe the funniest this show has ever gotten. Because as Batman, Joker is on Jim Carrey levels of buffoonery that Tommy Lee Jones would not sanction. Here's just an example of the Clown Prince of the Batcave.
Graffiti. That's a pretty serious offense, girls. But that's why I became a crime fighter, to take out garbage like you.
And Joker doesn't just decide to be Batman either. He decides that he needs a Joker too. And in an effort of finding one, he attempts to turn Batman into him. And he does so by injecting him with Joker venom. This rogue role reversal really does a number on the status quo. It even sees the Joker attempt to fight crime despite he himself being the Clown Prince of it. But their brawl is broken up by a broken Batman, who has been reduced to a laughing lunatic with psychotic punchlines. One thing leads to another, and shortly thereafter, Penguin gets Jokerized. I love this episode, And that's despite the fact that I hate the implication of this episode. I don't like that the Joker is something that's transferable, rather than him just being humanity at its worst. I do think it makes him feel a little bit less special, but it does at least lead to an interesting narrative and an entertaining episode. Nothing wrong with defying expectations so long as you're not diverting entertainment. Without question, Joker was involved in this season's best stories and memorable moments, including, but not limited to, an episode that sees the Joker pollute the airwaves as he terrorizes Gothamites. It's a moment that feels reminiscent of what Joker does in the '89 movie, or accidentally related scenes, but they were a lot of fun nonetheless. And toward the end of the season, Joker also abducts Detective Yin, and the manner in which that happened to remind me a lot of The Killing Joke. Joker in a disguise complete with a hat knocking at a woman's door? Yeah, this could have gone very, very differently than it did. And thank God it didn't. Late into the season, Professor Hugo Strange decides to use an experimental device to infiltrate Joker's mind, in an effort to find the missing detective that he's taken hostage. But instead, both he and Batman wind up nearly succumbing to the Joker's madness, which makes sense when putting yourself in a world of nonsense. Joker rules the ruleless, so putting yourself in his clown shoes is putting yourself at a very large disadvantage. The episode winds up being a lot of fun and provides a lot of odd visuals that lead to more questions about the villain than answers. It does, however, give us the first and only glimpse of the character prior to his clownage. Strangely enough, Hugo Strange isn't even necessarily depicted as a villain initially.
That comes later.
I would be remiss to not mention the series finale, which saw a war waged between Gotham's criminal underground, with Penguin, Joker, and Riddler all going head-to-head. Two-head. They weren't working together, but rather competing against each other, with the winner of their little game being whoever managed to take down the Dark Knight. Unsurprisingly, despite having the odds very much stacked in their favor, none of the villains win, with each one of them being outdone by Batman. Now this is a closure that really puts a period at the end of the season sentence. One thing I really need to comment on the show about, and compliment this show for, is that there's so many unique stylistic choices that I would have never appreciated as a kid. So much attention is put into the small details, despite the more major ones sometimes feeling transparent. Like how there's not a cloud in the sky, and it's also different colors every other scene. But it's the small details that really make me love this series. Sometimes even their establishing shots radiate personality. One of my favorite details is this whole slew of Easter eggs in one scene, when we get to see a separate side of the Batcave, and it's filled with trophies from Batman's previous battles. Season also sees a whole host of new Batman suits that really only existed to sell more toys. And I know this because when I was a kid at the time, I remember seeing all of these in my cousin's bedroom. Hey Toms, how you doing? The action this season has mostly stayed the same, if not improved. The scope of things has really gotten bigger, with very well choreographed fight scenes between multiple parties. Seeing the Batman, the Joker, and the Penguin have an unsanctioned triple threat match in an alley is not something I ever wanted, but it definitely was something that I needed. Even aside from the fights, the visual of seeing the Joker, the Penguin, and the Riddler clash and collide was something else. There are also some things I think deserve a little bit more of the spotlight than I've previously given them. Like this show's Penguin is quite frankly maybe the most threatening version of this villain, and it never feels inaccurate to the antagonist. Giving him the ability to stand toe-to-toe with the Dark Knight in hand-to-hand combat, 2 loyal ninja assassins at his beck and call, and a plethora of pigeons at his command really puts him over the top. I don't know that many other versions of this character have been. I just want to sing the praises of this bizarre, deranged variant of the Joker one more time. He is one of, if not the most, dark, comedic, and chaotic clown that an on-screen Batman has ever faced. He is maybe funnier than he's ever been before. It just sucks that the design of this character is so divisive that it throws people off of a performance that is honestly way more than serviceable. After having sat through the second season, I can tell you in complete truth, it is just as good as season 1. And it's these first 2 seasons of the show when the series truly felt like it was in its prime. It's not that I didn't like what came next, it's just that I didn't love it anywhere near as much as I loved what came before it. And hopefully you watching this, if you happen to make it this far, loved or at least liked this video. If you did, and you want to keep this bad train a-going as we head toward a Season 3 retrospective of the show, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
TTFN, ta-ta for now.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.